I've said a few times before on this blog that I'm not terribly familiar with much anime, but I definitely have seen some of the Studio Ghibli films. One of their most famous films is, of course, Kiki's Delivery Service, a cosy coming-of-age movie about a young witch who must make ends meet as a delivery girl, flying around on her broom to ensure people get their orders. I'm sure I am mentioning this for absolutely no reason and it will not come up again. Anyway, today's subject is Mika and the Witch's Mountain, an adorable, cozy video game with a coming-of-age story about a young witch who must make ends meet as a delivery girl, flying around on her broom to ensure people get their orders. Isn't it lovely when games have original ideas? What's that, irony? Never heard of it. You're listening to the almighty Backlog. I'm Ellie and today's review is on Mika and the Witch's Mountain, available for PC, PlayStation 4, PlayStation 5, Switch, Xbox One and the Xbox Series XS. This review is based on the PC version. Originally released in August of 2024, developed by Nukefist and published by Chibig. It's an adventure game and How Long to Beat has an average playtime of about 6 hours. I feel I should clarify something. Mika and the Witch's Mountain is a lovely game, and it does not really deserve my sarcasm in that intro. There's absolutely nothing wrong with borrowing a concept from another source, much less from one so well revered. In this instance, it simply felt very on the nose as far as drawing obvious links from one work to another go. And to be honest, as an idea to adapt into a game form, you'd be hard pressed to say Kiki's Delivery Service doesn't make sense. After all, the basic premise of running parcels from one place to another already has an immediate gamey feel to it, with very straightforward success and failure states, and combining it with flight means you can build in both a lot of free movement and a nicely sized open world to fit it in, all things a video game playing audience likes to see. And that is indeed what Mika and the Witch's Mountain goes on to do. We are a young witch in training, the titular Mika, who climbs up a great big mountain to the house perched on its summit in order to train with the legendary witch who lives there. However, said witch turns out to be, well, witchy. That is, she's a crotchety old bat who doesn't think much of Mika and sends her and her broom tumbling down to the island far below. Although Mika lands safely, her trusty broom is damaged, putting the kibosh on her plans to ascend the mountain once more and give the witch up there a piece of her mind. Thankfully, Mika comes to rest in a small but bustling harbour town, where a kindly craftswoman offers to help fix her broom. She needs a bit of cash to afford the materials, so Mika decides to get a job in order to earn that money. The job she finds is with the local postal delivery service, under the management of a phenomenally arrogant and condescending young man. Despite his snide remarks, Mika ingratiates herself with the town, flying around the island to deliver items to the inhabitants. And what an eclectic bunch of characters they are. Developers Nukefist definitely did a good job of filling the island with a wide cast of weird and wonderful individuals, many of whom have some genuinely strong writing underpinning them. Helping the veteran sea captain who spends his days staring out at the waters of the harbour leads us onto a young relative of his, and as the game progresses we see that their relationship is one underpinned by a deep sense of insecurity. One man we meet wrestles with his desire to leave the island and his sense of care and duty to his mother's ostrich farm. An introverted artist struggles with his hellishly wild children. There's even an aggressively awful corporate owner whose factory clings to the mountainside like some sort of smoke-belching limpet. There's a strong anti-capitalist bent to the dialogue and story as the aforementioned factory owner takes advantage of the town. And as the plot progresses, it becomes clear that his influence has a grim grip over the fate of the townsfolk. It's present down to a micro level, as his horrendous attitude is just as visible in the obnoxious responses of the proprietor of the town's postal service. Truly, the only thing that trickles down is being nasty to people poorer than yourself. You'd think I enjoyed the themes of the game, and I did, but I didn't connect with it as much as I'd have liked. The writing in Mika is, unfortunately, not especially to my taste. Some of that comes down to simply being a bit clunky, and other times it's because the main recurring characters are quite irritating in how they talk to Mika, but chiefly it's because there is a trite, twee air to the dialogue that in my experience really typifies a lot of this era of cozy games. It's sort of like a bland millennial coating. That can be overlooked, however, if the gameplay loop is fun, and Mika does have a strong core concept. Each in-game day presents us with a series of deliveries to make, which we must pick up and deliver to the correct person. The game often, but not always, tells us roughly where the recipient is on the island, which is fine. It means that there could have been a bit more of a logic puzzle element to it had it not, but this game sits squarely in the cozy games subcategory, and giving the player helpful information is in keeping with the genre's ethos. Each item has hit points, which deplete if you make heavy contact with an obstacle, and as you've no doubt surmised, if that object runs out of HP, it's considered broken, which, despite what companies like Every might have you believe, is actually not the ideal state for a parcel. Some items have additional constraints, such as not being able to get them wet, or very occasionally a time limit, but the game's interest is less in challenging the player with tough additional limitations, and more about wanting you to get out and explore. At about halfway through the story, the day-by-day structure kind of falls apart a little, and the game pivots to a somewhat more open-ended version of itself. You stop getting a central place to get deliveries given to you, and instead you need to find them organically around the map. The shift to a greater focus on exploration is a much needed one actually. While the looser structure took me a moment to get used to, it works better for giving the player space to find and delve into what turned out to be a relatively wide array of sub-deliveries. There are at least a few side quests that revolve around finding sets of items, such as stuck kites or missing kittens, and these definitely require you to scour the island and explore all of its different biomes. While you're doing that, the game also has plenty of collectibles. There are 100 statuettes to find, crammed in nooks and crannies across the island, which are in turn exchanged as currency for new skins and charms to hang from your broom. There are also a small handful of hidden cosmetic broom trails to grab, and a full set of the Major Arcana tarot cards sequestered in giant pots that you have to dive bomb to smash open. It's an honestly baffling amount of content stuffed into what is ultimately not that big a game world, and the fact that much of it unlocks extra customization options for Mika is a genuine joy. I have to say, I didn't wind up doing every optional thing that the game offers. I passed on the races, I definitely didn't bother getting all the statuettes, and while the fishing mechanic is enjoyably silly, I didn't finish it because of the amount of stuff to do was a bit exhausting. Having said that, the game is a bit of a one-trick pony. The main thing you're getting your head around is how the flying works, which can be a bit fiddly at times. Mika's only at the beginning of her witchy journey after all, so she can't maintain consistent flight for any length of time. Once you're in the air, it's not long before you slowly glide back down to ground level. You can try and pull up out of the little dive bombs to gain a bit of speed and altitude, but it's finicky at best. Thankfully, the further you progress, the more you'll open up speed boosting magic rings and vents of rising air to help you ascend to greater heights and reach further distances. I say then that it's a one-trick pony because once you've mastered the flight, the main meat of the game simply revolves around delivery. Once you've done that for a few hours, the prospect of hoovering up the side content of Mika winds up feeling a bit knackering in my experience. I think that sense of variety is probably what I felt was missing from Mika. If it had in some way managed to freshen up its gameplay loop with something new, I think then that I'd have ticked over from liking it to loving it. Alas, that's not the case, and after around 4 hours of play and getting into the post-game, I knew that I'd seen all I needed and done all I wanted. There is something to be said in favour of a game that sates you, and Mika did that, and I'm very glad it did and that it exists. After all, this is such a niche idea for a game that it could really only exist in the current indie development era that we are in. While its writing doesn't much suit me, and I feel like it's crying out for something more to round the game out, Mika and the Witch's Mountain is still a creative, lovely game. The final score is 4 out of 7. Good. Sure, maybe something doesn't quite work, but it has heart, or a spark of excitement that makes it worthwhile despite the faults. Worth a go if you can find it on sale. This has been Ellie on the Almighty Backlog. You can support this project by reading the review over on thealmightybacklog.wordpress.com, or by listening to the pod review hosted on RSS and YouTube. Please feel free to follow me over on Mastodon, Blue Sky and or Backlogged by following the links on the blog. If you'd like to support the show financially, you can do so by donating via PayPal to thealmightybacklog@gmail.com or by hitting the donate button on the website. Thank you for listening and have a lovely day.